The good thing about the running back position at this moment in time is that we're currently sitting here really looking at only one real injury. The bad news with running backs is there's a lot of open backfields that could easily have 2 running backs this week. So as we go through these top 30 running back rankings for week 1, it'll be important to keep that in mind. Starting out with our first guy here, obviously Christian McCaffrey is going to top the list at number 1. He's taking on the New York Jets this week. Now, he's the only guy that really has concerns with injury, I guess, and even then, it's not really a concern. From what I'm seeing, the Christian McCaffrey saga has been slow played really to perfection by the 49ers, as they've been extremely cautious with his injury, so to not re-injure, because it's not like this guy needs actual training camp time or actual preseason time. This is a proven veteran who is an elite player for the San Francisco 49ers, so they're trying to ensure nothing else happens to him. From everything I've seen, he looks to be ready to go. And even though the Jets defense is strong, it's Christian McCaffrey we're talking about. So at number 2, I've got Breece Hall going up in the same matchup in San Francisco. Now, obviously, the matchup here is tougher, but the reason I have Breece Hall above a bunch of other guys that I think are in great matchups this week, I think that Breece Hall is about to hit we're going to all recognize that he's an elite player in this league. Now, I think a lot of people kind of know that Breece Hall is an elite talent. I think everybody knows that he's obviously a top-tier running back in fantasy. I think what we're going to see from Breece this year is him kind of take that next step towards that Christian McCaffrey, maybe have the torch handed over to him. Not saying that's this week versus the 49ers. I'm just saying that's the reason he's number 2 for me, because I don't really worry about matchup when it comes to Breece Hall. Now, at 3 and 4, to round out the first tier, I love these matchups. Etienne taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Saquon Barkley taking on the Green Bay Packers. Now, Etienne is someone that I've been big on basically all offseason long. I get it, Raheem Mostert is listed as the running back 1. The reality that people need to know about the Miami Dolphins is that Mike McDaniel, the head coach, loves a 2 running back system. This is what he does with the Miami Dolphins to absolute perfection. So Raheem Mostert, you'll see him later on this list. I just think Etienne, this game, the way it goes, I think it's going to fit well. I think it's going to be one of the highest scoring matchups of the week because neither team really has a great defense. And so Etienne will get a lot of pass catching work. And I think that Etienne is going to be a massive boom play this week. Now with Saquon Barkley, haven't been big on Saquon all season. I have him lower in my season-long rankings. This is a good week for Saquon, I think. Again, with Green Bay's defense, improvements probably have been made with personnel additions. Obviously, they got a new defensive coordinator. We'll see if he works out there. I'm still not sold on the Packers defense because I just haven't seen it yet. So with the Kellen Moore-led offense against the Green Bay Packers at home on Friday night, I do like Saquon Barkley's upside a lot to get in the end zone maybe once or even twice. I'm not going to predict that because I still do think the tush push is a problem. But Saquon Barkley against a probably softer defense, in my eyes, I like Saquon Barkley this week. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, Bijan Robinson and James Cook are at 5 and 6 here. Now, with Bijan Robinson taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers at home this week, I really do think that the Steelers are not going to be as great stopping the run as a lot of teams think. I think that Bijan Robinson is obviously going to have the question mark lingering over him all week. How much is Tyler Algier involved? I don't think it's out of left field that question is coming about, but I just ultimately have more confidence in Bijan just taking over serious volume and getting in the end zone at the goal line this week against Pittsburgh than I do with some other guys that we'll get to here in a couple tiers. Now with James Cook here, James Cook I think is in a great matchup this week. James Cook versus the Arizona Cardinals. Not only do the Cardinals have a weak defense, I think, but we also have to remember, James Cook is probably their best weapon as of today. I think Dalton Kincaid will rise to be a top weapon in this offense. I think he already is. I think Keon Coleman eventually probably will rise to be a top target. But we know what we're getting with James Cook. James Cook is going to be extremely efficient on the ground, and he's also going to get a lot of pass catching opportunities from Josh Allen. So Josh Allen, James Cook, with another year of Joe Brady at coordinator, I love this matchup against the Cardinals' weaker defense here. So when I look at this line on underdog for him, 0.5 rushing plus reception touchdowns. And the fact that it's boosted by over 1x, this is going to be one that I am going to take advantage of this particular week of fantasy football because, like I said, I think the weaker defense is going to help him get to this number. So if you're as bullish as I am on this one, you can join Underdog today using that link in the comments below. And when you use code FFN to sign up for Underdog and deposit at least $10, $10, they will give you a 50% deposit match up to $1,000 in free bonus cash. And plus, you'll get to take advantage of the free Travis Kelce line this week. Him getting over half a yard, obviously that's a great free pick to have. Now, going down to our next guy, Travis Etienne at 7 and Jahmyr Gibbs at 8. Again, Travis Etienne is a part of this matchup versus the Miami Dolphins. I think it's just going to be a fantastic matchup this week in fantasy football. And similar to Saquon Barkley, he's actually up a lot higher than I ranked him during the actual entirety of the season, because I think that this week we're going to see a good Travis Etienne game. Travis Etienne will get pass catching opportunities here in this shootout, I do believe. And I also do believe that Jacksonville really doesn't have a solid wide receiver option right now. Christian Kirk is hurt. He may or may not play this week. Brian Thomas Jr., I think, needs some time to evolve into the player he can be. And obviously, it's going to be Evan Ingram and maybe Christian Kirk. So a lot of emphasis will be on Travis Etienne this week, just based out of availability, I think. So Travis Etienne, I think he has a pretty good game. And then with Jahmyr Gibbs, the guy that a lot of people may have concerns about, don't worry. Jahmyr Gibbs expected to be a full go this week. No problems at all. And also an opportunity that I love, because I think this game could be high scoring against the Los Angeles Rams as well. So Jahmyr Gibbs, just with the upside that he's going to see through the reception totals, he'll get plenty of carries through the 20s. Love Jahmyr Gibbs this week. Now, Kyren Williams rounds out this tier at number 9, and he's taking on the Detroit Lions in Detroit. Again, a part of this high scoring matchup, I think. And I think a lot of people will, fight this ranking and, say he should be lower or say he should be higher. I think we're in a weird position right now with Kyren Williams, where some people think that the punt returning status is bad for Kyren Williams, while me and other people probably think it's not that big of a deal. I don't think it's a big deal. Kyren Williams is going to lead this backfield, in my opinion, and we'll see it against Detroit. The only reason he's actually lower for me this week is because I do think the Detroit Lions will have a pretty solid defense in this game. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, Derrick Henry is at 10, and Jonathan Taylor is at 11. So Derrick Henry at the Kansas City Chiefs this week. I just kind of have a feeling it's sort of like my Mike Evans prediction from the wide receiver video. I just kind of feel like Derrick Henry's going to have a good game. Obviously, Derrick Henry is with a much better offense this year with the Baltimore Ravens. Offensive line, a little bit shaky with Baltimore. I trust them to iron this out because they've historically had a good offensive line over the years. So I trust that they'll figure it out. And I also just think that Derrick Henry is uniquely built to continue to be a really good player at this point of his career. So I think that Derrick Henry is going to be kind of around this area for a lot of the season. And there's going to be weeks where he's higher, but the Kansas City Chiefs obviously are a really good defense. But his opportunity to get in the end zone this week, I think, is going to be there, since they'll probably have a couple trips to the red zone. Now, Jonathan Taylor is going to be at 11 here, taking on the Houston Texans this week at home. So obviously, divisional matchup, it makes it tougher to really rank him higher than I would like. I want to rank Jonathan Taylor higher. I would like to, but the divisional matchup scares me a little bit. And I also think that Houston's defense is going to be really, really good this year. And I said this on the wide receiver ranking video. I still view the Indianapolis Colts offense as a bit of a mystery. The reason I do is because when I watched Anthony Richardson in the preseason, he was really shaky. It gives me Justin Fields vibes. I think he's a better player than Justin Fields, but it ultimately does affect everybody around him, including Jonathan Taylor. Now, JT, I think, will be really efficient, but this may not be his best week, which is why he's actually lower than I'd like to, but obviously you play him. Now, Alvin Kamara is at 12, and Isaiah Pacheco is at 13 here. So with Alvin Kamara, I think this is going to be a good Kamara week because he's taking on the Carolina Panthers defense, which I think could be better this year just because they were just an organizational disaster last year. I think with a stable force with Dave Canales, they get a little more ironed out. But obviously, they sent away Brian Burns, and this defense just looks a little bit weaker overall. So I think Alvin Kamara gets like 7 to 8 targets this week at the very least. Going to be inefficient on the ground, but I do think this is a good Alvin Kamara week to play him right here. And then with Isaiah Pacheco, I actually worry about him in this Baltimore Ravens matchup, not only because I think Baltimore is probably going to be the best fantasy football defense this year, but I also think that there is a legitimate question at this point for me with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's on the non-football injury list now, so he's going to miss the next 4 games at least. Now it's Samaje Perine is number 2. So what are the chances at some point that Samaje Perine gets more targets at some point in the season? I don't know if it's going to happen this week. Probably not. But against the Ravens, and just with the shadow of doubt, I've bumped down Isaiah Pacheco a little bit. Now, Josh Jacobs is at 14, James Conner's at 15, and Raheem Mostert is at 16, rounding out this tier. And with Josh Jacobs just in this matchup versus Philly, in Philadelphia against this defense, lowers him a little bit for me. And there also is news that Marshawn Lloyd looks like he probably is going to play this week. Now, do I ultimately think that they're going to give a decent workload for Marshawn Lloyd after he's missed basically all offseason? Probably not this week, but Josh Jacobs, I think, just has better opportunities based on matchups ahead of him. And while I do think that Green Bay's offense is going to show everybody they're elite this year, probably not the best game for Josh Jacobs in particular because of this strong defensive front. Now, James Conner against Buffalo in this matchup, again, I think it has potential to be high scoring. I don't love Buffalo's defense. I probably like them than most people do, but I don't love their defense. And James Conner was just he was so efficient last year. He's coming in fully healthy, so I just don't see much drop-off from last year. And I think that just based on him coming in fully healthy right now, in this matchup against Buffalo, where I do see a really healthy workload and pass-catching opportunities as well, I like James Conner this week quite a bit. And then Raheem Mostert against the Jags, love the matchup, as I said, love the opportunity. I just have him lower, and probably will for a lot of this season, than Devon Etienne, because I believe Etienne is going to gobble up all the reception work, and that's going to be a lot of upside in this offense. Raheem Mostert repeating the touchdown number from last year, tall task, but possible. And I think that this could be a game where he has a touchdown, maybe two. So he's got a higher ceiling than this, but I don't think his floor is quite as high because I do believe that Devon Etienne will ultimately be the guy this week for the Miami Dolphins here. Now, dropping down to our next tier here, I've got Rashad White at 17 and Kenneth Walker at 18. So Rashad White is taking on the Washington Commanders this week, and I love the matchup. I think it's really, really strong matchup. Rashad White, the ultimate concern for me is, how does he respond without Dave Canales? Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator in Tampa last year, now the head coach over in Carolina, was really responsible for helping Rashad White break out. Obviously, he gave him tons of volume, but even then, wasn't very efficient still. So he struggles with inefficiency, obviously. Will he get the entirety of the targets? Because Bucky Irving still is a legitimate question in this offense. Does he take more targets this week? That's why I've got him lower this week, but I do think against Washington, high ceiling play. Now with Kenneth Walker here, I'm probably still too low on him, according to many of you in the comment section. That's totally fine. He's going up against the Denver Broncos. Look, I'm getting more and more on board with the notion that Kenneth Walker's the 3-down guy. I've seen more and more stuff about it from the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, and I do ultimately think that Charbonnet will have a workload. That's really not the problem this week. The problem, I think, is Denver's defense is going to be good this year. I think Denver's defense is much better than they were at the beginning of last year, and people will start to see it at the start of this year. So Kenneth Walker, I ultimately think this is a lower scoring game, and Vegas thinks so too. So I just think Kenneth Walker probably doesn't have as many scoring opportunities this week. Now, David Montgomery's at 19, and my guy, Chuba Hubbard, is at 20 this week. So with David Montgomery here, obviously we know the workload is going to be there for him. He's going to be getting the goal line work. He's going to be getting a lot of carries between the 20s. No reception upside whatsoever. So naturally, he just doesn't have the upside that Jahmyr Gibbs does on a given week, but obviously can score better than Jahmyr Gibbs on any given week. So against this Rams front seven, without Ernest Jones at the linebacker position, I wonder how good this front seven is going to be, especially without Raheem Morris as their DC anymore. So I'll be curious to see what this Rams defense looks like. And David Montgomery obviously has a really high floor and a really high ceiling as well. Now with Chuba Hubbard here, I don't know where everybody else ranks him. I don't really care. Chuba Hubbard against the New Orleans Saints this week, I think people start to see that he's actually going to be a good player right now. Chuba Hubbard with Dave Canales, I think is going to be a good fit. Against this New Orleans Saints front seven, not exactly the best matchup. I'm not going to say it's the best matchup. It's a divisional game, and New Orleans front seven, pretty strong. So not exactly the greatest matchup, but the workload is going to be there. And I trust in Dave Canales' ability to find ways to get Chuba Hubbard the ball in space and let him work. So I just am big on Chuba Hubbard this week. This is probably not going to be popular among a lot of people, but I'm going with my guy Chuba Hubbard this week. Now, Joe Mixon rounds out this tier at 21 against the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis. So with Joe Mixon, again, you probably want to see him higher than Chuba Hubbard. My problem with Mixon, I've made it clear, this guy is 28 years old, coming into a new team, didn't practice with them all offseason. So what are we expecting his upside to be right away? Because I know a lot of people think it's high. I don't. And because Houston last year didn't want to run the ball. Now, obviously, they had Damon Pierce and Devin Singletary for a little bit. So it's like neither of those guys are on the level of Mixon as a player. But this is going to be a pass-first team. So I struggle with this one because he's missed time, hasn't really been able to play in this system at all. I'm not off Joe Mixon, but I do really want to see him do something first before I actually move him up to respectable territory. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here. Zach Moss is at 22 to start it out, and DeAndre Swift is at 23 as well. So with Zach Moss, he's taking on the New England Patriots. So obviously, as you can see, a lot of this tier is comprised of guys who are in confusing backfields. So we don't know what the workload's going to look like exactly. With Zach Moss this week, just based on everything I know about the Cincinnati Bengals, them being a split committee backfield, and Chase Brown, I think, has more reception upside than Zach Moss. I think the Bengals are going to win this game, and I think there's a decent chance that they're up by a couple touchdowns. So I think that Zach Moss has the ability to run out the clock for them, maybe better in position than Chase Brown does. So I think this might be a Zach Moss type of week here against the New England Patriots. With DeAndre Swift, I do like him this week against the Titans. I think he's the running back one by a mile, but we'll have to see. I mean, DeAndre Swift has never been a volume-heavy guy. They signed him to be their guy in Chicago, so I think he will be their guy. But I don't count out the fact that Rashad Johnson might get some opportunities here. But ultimately, against a Tennessee defense that is on the right path, but maybe takes some time to gel, I like DeAndre Swift okay this week. And with Jerome Ford at 24 and Brian Robinson Jr. at 25, so Jerome Ford's down here because he takes on the Cowboys. And I really just don't see a ton of upside for Cleveland's offense, especially right away. I mean, Deshaun Watson, this situation is still a mess. And of course, if you don't have a good quarterback, it's harder for a running back to be really, really efficient on offense. So Jerome Ford is not Breece Hall. Like, he's not playing with Zach Wilson and making it happen all on his own. Jerome Ford's just not that talented. So he needs help against the Cowboys defense this week. Don't love the matchup, and I just really don't like the Browns offense right now. So I'm lower on Jerome Ford as a result. Now, Brian Robinson Jr. at 25 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Tampa this week. This is a week where I don't love Brian Robinson. I think Brian Robinson gets better throughout the offseason. I want to make it clear, though, it's not because I think Austin Eckler is going to have a good week. I think Austin Eckler is not going to have many good weeks, if any, because he's just a pass-catching running back with a running quarterback. So Brian Robinson, I think, handles the majority of the volume in this backfield. Maybe not this week because I believe they will get Austin Eckler involved in this offense. They'll probably try to force some carries. And against a stronger Tampa Bay front seven, don't love less volume with a rookie quarterback when this offense probably is going to take time to gel. Now, Javonte Williams at 26 here against the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. Very similar situation. I think he's going to lead the backfield this week. I don't know what the workload's going to look like, though. Does he lead the backfield with 13 carries and Jaleel McLaughlin gets 9 carries? Or is it going to be 17 carries for Javonte with 4 carries for Jaleel McLaughlin and maybe a couple receptions as well for him? I don't know quite yet. Javonte Williams taking on the Seattle Seahawks defense, though. I do like the ability for this to get a decent upside play from Javonte. I just don't really trust his workload as of today. That's why I'm lower on Javonte this week. And then with Devin Singletary to round out the tier 27 against the Minnesota Vikings, the funny thing is he has his workload basically ironed out for him out of all the rest of this tier, except for maybe Jerome Ford. But with Devin Singletary, I just don't like the New York Giants, their offense. And I actually do think that Minnesota's defense being a little bit slept on. Brian Flores runs this defense. They've made defensive personnel moves. Obviously, losing Danielle Hunter's not a good thing, but I do think that Minnesota's defense is going to be stronger this year. And I just don't like the Giants' offense very much. So ultimately, I just think against a better defense this week, he's not going to have too much upside in fantasy football week 1. Now, dropping down to our last tier right here. Gus Edwards at 28, Rico Dowdle at 29, and Zamir White at 30. Now, with Gus Edwards here, this is the most mysterious backfield to me because they're not only a mystery, but I want in on a Chargers running back. I just don't know who is going to be yet. I think it's going to be Gus Edwards. Every indication says it's going to be Gus Edwards, but he didn't play all preseason. We don't know how he looks yet. And against this Las Vegas Raiders defense, not a ton of upside in a divisional matchup to start. This offense is going to take time to gel, and like I said, I don't know how effective Gus Edwards will be. So I want in. I like Gus Edwards. I would take him out of the Chargers running backs, and I want a Chargers running back, but that's why he's at 28. Rico Dowdle, very important news to highlight here. So with Rico Dowdle's situation, it is important to know that Todd Archer is an inside reporter for the Dallas Cowboys. He's been reporting on them since the early 2000s. So what Todd Archer comes out and says just a little bit earlier this week, in a room that includes Elliott and Dalvin Cook, Dowdle should be the favorite to lead the Cowboys in rushing attempts and rushing yards this season. So I do think that Zeke will be involved to some extent through target opportunities. And against the Browns, I don't love this matchup, but I'm ready to take Rico Dowdle. I'm ready to take him. If he's on your waiver wire, I would go grab him because I think he's playable immediately. Now with 30, Zamir White to round it out at the Los Angeles Chargers. Hate the matchup and just really don't like this offensive situation. Zamir White, there's no question volume's going to be there for him. He's going to monopolize this backfield. The question is, how valuable are the opportunities, and really, how many rushing carries is he going to get in this game against the Chargers, where I think they're going to lose? So Zamir White, just really don't like the offensive situation here. Offensive line is shaky too, so I'm lower on him this week. Now, what I do at the end of every single ranking video per week in fantasy football is I give you my favorite underdog running back pick to pick an underdog weekly draft. So you can get in any kind of Sunday main slate drafts or even primetime drafts that are going to be exclusive for the primetime games or the NFL Sunday games in any particular week. So this week, my favorite pick, if you are to draft in one of those leagues, is Jaleel McLaughlin. Jaleel McLaughlin taking on the Seattle Seahawks here. As I said with Javonte Williams, I think he's going to lead this backfield, but I do think that Jaleel McLaughlin is going to get target opportunities this week. This is going to be a tighter matchup, in my opinion, this week. And also, when you look at what is being opened up with Samaje Perine, basically 60 targets out of this running back field are open. Rookie quarterback in his first game, probably going to dump the ball off a couple times. And Jaleel McLaughlin, if he gets the opportunities, could get plenty of those opportunities and honestly has touchdown upside getting receiving work this week. So let me know how your lineup is looking so far this week. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for week 1 fantasy football, click on this video right here.